The story of the road to Emmaus is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and especially my favorite Easter resurrection story. I think in so many ways, our baptismal journey is a story of being on the road, of being on a journey, of traveling through life and traveling deeper and deeper into the depths of connection with God, with ourselves, with earth, and with one another. This story on the road opens with two disciples walking away from Jerusalem, presumably to their home or to a place where they are going to stay for the rest of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We don't know how long these particular disciples have been following Jesus, but they seem to have at least followed him to Jerusalem, witnessed the end of his ministry there, and seen him crucified. It must have been devastating entering Jerusalem with so much hope that this was the Messiah, the one who was to redeem Israel. We had hoped, is what they say in the story, only to be slapped down and to be reminded that the empire had the power after all. Or so it seems. The two walk along the road talking about everything that has happened in their grief, in their disappointment, and in their pain. And Jesus shows up. They don't even recognize him. He sees their pain and their disappointment, thinking that Jesus was not the hoped-for Messiah. And this stranger tries to explain it to them. He tells them that hope is not lost, that the Messiah needed to die. He demonstrates how Scripture supports this understanding. And the text doesn't tell us what Jesus said, but I'm betting it was eloquent and convincing, and yet the disciples still don't recognize Jesus. They have the Scriptures explained, but these explanations, this theological analysis, doesn't open their eyes. It's not enough. In the next scene, the disciples have invited Jesus inside, and they gather around the table. And Jesus, despite being the guest at this party, takes the role of host. He's the one who takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to the disciples. And these actions, of course, are echoed in our communion liturgy, and they are echoes of previous meals throughout the Gospel of Luke that Jesus has shared with his followers. He performs this same pattern of taking bread, blessing, breaking it, and giving it in so many stories: the feeding of the 5,000, the Last Supper, and many other meals that Luke mentions, including meals he probably doesn't mention. It is only when Jesus acts out this role that the disciples finally recognize him for who he is. They experience him being himself, communing with them, just as Jesus has done before, and just as he will in the feast to come. His identity is not grasped with intellect alone, but by experiencing Jesus' action of sharing and solidarity in mealing together. It is this experience that was the missing piece for the disciples. I think many of us in this congregation can be kind of heady people, and I relate to that too. I like to try to figure everything out in my head and make it all make sense before I go out and do something. I do this with my theology too. I try to make a system out of it. There's a whole field of study called systematic theology because people really like to do that. We like to make it all fit together. However, I'm starting to see that maybe that process of needing to figure it out first and then take action, maybe that's backwards. Maybe it's never going to make sense until I go out and do things, unless I turn my focus from my own intellectual wanderings to my actual experience in the world. This is hard for me personally, and I know that it's hard for others. It requires trust. It requires us to be countercultural and de-emphasize the categorical, systematized way of thinking that our culture prefers. In many ways, I think that the journey of living out one's baptism, like I said, is like being on this road to Emmaus. We walk together ever since our baptism day. We walk together on this baptismal road together. And if we go to Sunday school or Bible study or adult ed, we can learn how to study the Bible. We can learn how to interpret the Scriptures and reinterpret the Scriptures and again until our heads are spinning. And yet, learning the scripture and learning the tradition, it's not the whole package for us. God's activity is alive and active in our world today, and it's alive and active in our lives, and we don't know what's coming next. So as we try to live out the values we are taught in the practicalities of everyday life, things don't go as planned. Sometimes our eyes are opened to new realities that we never expected to see, that we never had expected to have on our life's path. Sometimes those realities make us stop and stand still with sadness, just as the disciples on this road to Emmaus. And sometimes we have opportunities to experience the risen Christ, being himself in community with us in that grief, in community with us in sharing a meal, in ways big and small, in ways that we didn't even know existed. Hopefully we learn to recognize Jesus, his hospitality, his concern for bodily needs, his sharing of resources, his suffering, and his communion with people on the outside. This experience of Christ will change us along this baptismal journey. Sometimes it will cause us pain because we will feel the suffering of the world. Sometimes it will give us hope, but it will always be prompting us to grow, always be leading us to resurrection. If the road to Emmaus is any indication, I expect that in this process of recognizing the risen Christ around us, we will also discover that we are enriched in ways that we did not even realize, that Christ is with us in ways that we did not even recognize. Part of having your eyes open to Christ's presence is discovering that he has been there with you all along. The disciples don't realize that Jesus is with them until their eyes are opened at the meal, but then they are able to look back, and they realize that he was with them on the road, even when they didn't fully understand. This is one of the many, many pieces of good news in this story. Christ has been and is present in the community, in this community, in your community, in so many ways. And some of these ways are known to us now, and some of them have yet to be recognized, but we can celebrate the experiences where Christ was made known to us. And there is no need to make perfect sense of everything else. Christ is not found through our intellectual grasping. All we can do is trust that Christ is with us and that with experience, we will be able to recognize the resurrected one in our midst.